Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the Flicksation Podcast. It is that time once again every year that we come around and talk about the best of the year in film. This year, no exception. It is 2019. Well, it's the end of the 2019 film season. So this is the best of 2019 in film. What's up, everybody? My name, Eric Madsen. Here at Flicksation Studios, P City, Wisco. Over in Denver, Colorado, the minister is here. Minister, welcome to the program. It is time again, man. I know you're excited.
Yeah, I'm ready. And last year I was not even on the show, so it's 2 years here. I had moving across the country anxiety last year and did not fit it in. So now, it feels hard again, like I forgot how to do this. But I'm ready to go. I'm prepared.
And now you're about to move again, only over there.
Probably 3 miles instead of however many, 1,000 or so. So it'll be better.
Yeah.
Easier, much easier, cheaper.
You're pretty much used to moving every year at this point, so.
Yeah, I'm going to move 3 miles a year until I'm on top of a mountain.
All right, Robert Gassaway, Phoenix, Arizona. Robert, welcome.
Yeah, this is the show I always look forward to the most, but it is bittersweet. You know, out with the old, in with the new. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. What lies ahead, no one knows. It could be awful, or it could be so much better. Anything could happen, guys.
Are you talking about Fantasy Island, the worst of times?
Is that, if that's what we're calling it? Yeah.
Speaking of fantasies, Ian Nichols, you are here. Ian, Portland, Oregon. Welcome.
Thank you. I like to think that I am everyone's fantasies come true. However, that is most likely not everyone's reality. I love recording this episode every year, and I'm glad I get to do it once again. I'm glad to have the minister back, too. I have a feeling tonight there's going to be a lot of crossovers between our lists. I have a good feeling, and I'm thinking, call me crazy, but I'm thinking this year could be full of some horrific movies. That's all I'm going to say.
Interesting. So here on tonight's program, we're going to talk about our top 10 films of 2019, our top 5 performances, the 3 worst films. Guys, we've got the Ronnies and the Shitties back to be unveiled here at the show. And yeah, just a bunch of our favorite stuff from cinema in 2019. Contact the show via email, FlicksationPodcast@gmail.com. Call or text the voicemail line, 608-535-9302. And like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at Flicksation. All right, so 2019. Before I throw it around the room for just an overall thoughts or overall sense of how the year went for you guys, let's take a look at the money list as we do at the top of the show here all the time. Got Disney in the top 3 spots this time, guys. And also the 5th and 6th spot and the 8th and 9th spot. So got 2 Sonys and a Warner Brothers wedged in here as well. And one of the Sonys, pretty much Disney also. So number 1, and actually every film except the number 10 film broke the $1 billion mark worldwide. Number 1, you guessed it, Avengers Endgame with almost $3 billion. Number 2, the live-action re-release of The Lion King. Number 3, Frozen 2. Number 4, one of your quote-unquote Sony films, Spider-Man Far From Home. Number 5, Captain Marvel. Number 6, Toy Story 4. Number 7, kind of the surprise super hit of the year, R-rated Joker, just coming in over $1 billion. Just behind that, Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. Number 9, another remake of a Disney film here. This one, Aladdin, and just short of the billion mark at about $881 million. Number 10, Jumanji: The Next Level. Yeah, mostly sequels there, as per usual. Joker, sort of a sequel, not quite, but definitely a known property. So, no surprises there in the money list as far as films go, but I don't expect we'll see many of those. There's a couple of them that might come up tonight, but probably not much more than that. All right, 2019 in general, Robert Gassaway. Up year, down year, how many did you see? How did 2019 work for you, Robert?
It worked pretty well overall, but I think it was a little lackluster. Usually in this position every year, I'm saying it was a great year, another great year for cinema. I was a little down on it this year. I don't think like my top 10 we're going to go through is not as strong as earlier in the decade. I mean, we haven't been doing this show all decade, or at least I haven't, but I remember other years having a stronger top 10. But it was still good. I believe I saw 87 films total, which is slightly higher than last year. I was probably in the high 70s or low 80s last year. I believe I had my most rewatches ever. I've never been one. I used to rewatch movies all the time, but then in the last, 8-10 years, I kind of stopped rewatching stuff. I just wanted to find all the new stuff and check stuff off the list. But this year, I rewatched 26 things according to Letterboxd. But that's a lot of old films mostly. I did rewatch a lot of 2019 films, but only one in my top 10 did I see more than once. So usually I try to rewatch my top 10 to make sure that it deserves the high placing I'm giving it in the rankings. This year I rewatched a lot of stuff that was in my 10 to 20 range to see if it needed to move up or not. As we'll get into, I think it was another strong year in first time watches for me. Old films new to me, but that's true most years. I think it was a very good year for horror. In particular, I think I have 3 or 4 horror films in my top 15. And I finally caught up with a lot of old Stephen King. He's considered the master of horror, but when it comes to adapting his films, it's kind of hit or miss. And so I was thankful that Alamo Drafthouse had a series this year where they showed a lot of his films. I was able to catch up on for the first time in theater, but didn't love a lot of them. Only really flipped for a couple of those. And I think it was a down year for animation. Usually I'll have one animated film in my top 10 or close to it, but not so this year. So a little down overall, but still good.
Yeah, I'll have to piggyback off of Robert's sentiments in that, yeah, this was a bit of a down year. I averaged, or films that I watched that came out in 2019 averaged 2.88 stars, which is the lowest annual rating that I've given for a year since 1996. Yes, that was the year that Jingle All the Way, a Very Brady sequel, and Michael starring John Travolta came out.
Wow.
Yeah. So this year I watched a total of 121 2019 releases, and I watched a total of 316 films, including limited series and short films, feature films, rewatches, etc. I averaged about 6 movies a week and watched a total of over 500 hours worth from all 6 populated continents. Besides English language films or English language country films, I watched 24 French films, and 51 films got a 3-star rating, 51 films got a 3.5-star rating, and 51 films got a 4-star rating from me this year. So I would say overall of those 316, I saw a pretty decent to great amount of films. But ultimately, yeah, it was certainly a bit of a down year. Watched 84 horror films this last year. Could be why it was so down. Maybe I'm watching the wrong movies. It's happened before. But yeah, I was worried that I would not be able to get a top 25 just in general, and just happened to, in the cram session of the last month, squeak out some films that I'd been meaning to see for a while that were really, really, really great. It's just a shame that we have to wait till the end of the year or the very beginning of the following year to be able to find those films. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about my top 10.
Well, let me go ahead and say here, Ian, that a big congratulations to you for finally coming out victorious in the Oscar pool party.
Thank you.
Edging me out in the tiebreaker by hitting Best Picture, which I did not. I fell apart at the end as I was heavily 1917 loaded. And, of course, you were heavily Parasite loaded. So you ended up with the victory, the bragging rights, and whatever any of that is worth. I don't know. But congratulations, Ian. Good work.
Thank you. I'm sure it's worth something to someone somewhere.
And since you brought it up, pop quiz, what was Carol Brady's CB handle in a very Brady sequel?
Parasite.
That would be
1917?
Good. No. That's incorrect. It would be Christmas Carol. So.
Oh, God.
All right. Ian the Minister, 2019. Do you even remember anything from it?
Yeah, that was a theme of the year. There's a few of them. There's some stuff that's the same as every other year, and there's 10 I really wanted to see that never showed up anywhere, which is a huge bummer. I found that this was the year due to, of course, like I said, the move and multiple job changes, where I had the least amount of time and energy to actually sit with the films I did see, which is disappointing. And the other big change would be, as I whine about in our threads, but not on the show that much, I can't take a chance on a movie for $5 at the theater anymore. I have to pay $15, and that stops me from seeing all sorts of mediocre crap that could surprise. So I ended up, I think, exactly where Robert did with 87. I think I'd like to be hitting at least 100, and maybe 40 foreign language are kind of like minimums I'd like to keep at. So I'm a bit below that on both, but I might share the other guy's feeling on the year as a whole too. I think you have to sit with them a while before you're sure, but when we put together our best of the decade list pretty quickly here, I'll be, in fact, none of these, I can't imagine one of these will be in my top 10. So where does that put that compared to other recent years? I'm not sure, but there's 2 from last year that have a real shot. So at the very top, I'm not sure it stands up, but in a couple of years, we'll see what's I guess just sitting there with me. So I found stuff to like for sure. Overall on the year, I think some of it's by choice of what I saw, I'm sure, but I found very, very few emotionally moving and engaging films, but a lot of experienced films and a lot of absurdist comedy that worked. And some of that is just that stuff works so well on the surface, and you don't even have to sit with it as much. So I'm not sure, but I don't have a lot of tears this year, and I don't have a lot of gut ache from just very moving films. So you guys, there's a couple I could see maybe you guys did. And where Ian said he expects a lot of crossover, I'm a little surprised because I found that this year amongst us, there might have been the least amount of viewing crossover that I can remember.
All right, interesting. Yeah, I guess these last few years have none of them have been spectacular for me, so I pretty much come out with the same feeling until I put this thing together for this show. So I got through 65 films this year, which is clearly my average the last 4 years, as in 2016, 2017, and 2019, I had exactly the same 65 last year. Transpose the numbers, I had a 56 last year, but 65 films. It turned out okay. Making my list, I had 1 film at 4.5 stars, my clear number 1. I had 8 films with 4 stars. So that left 1 film in my 3.5 star range. I basically picked my favorite of about 20 3.5 star films. So I saw some lousy stuff, but not nearly as much bad stuff as I see in some years. So the bottom 3 are pretty bad, but they stood out against the pack. So that's probably good, but I don't know. Went okay. All right, so I think it's time to get started, guys, and talk about the first half of our top 10 films of 2019. We'll go from 10 to 6 here. We're going to start with the Minister. Minister, what is your number 10 film of 2019?
Yeah, I should be pretty tight on all of these, but if it's something none of us have spoken of at all on the show, I'll at least touch on what the fuck it is, basically. But otherwise, I'll be tight. And I'll say, like you were talking about your list, Eric, I had 9 absolutely for sure top 10, and then I had like 5 I kept shuffling through for number 10. But so my number 10 is Joe Talbot's Last Black Man in San Francisco, and I'm going to leave this basically entirely for someone else because I know of one of your lists. But just very, very brief. It's just this highly stylish, soulful, intimate, wonderful film that you're going to hear about later. But it is Last Black Man in San Francisco, and I was pretty surprised how much I went for it.
Yeah, my number 10 is 63 Up, which is part of the Up series. I believe it is, gosh, what would that be? The 9th entry in the film or in the entire series. And so for those of you that aren't aware, every 7 years, the director comes back to a set of roughly 15 people in Britain and just sees where they are in their lives, and it's based off of what type of school you go to. When they were 7 years old, it was supposed to be a one-time thing, just a quick, short documentary for a TV show, and then or for a TV station, and then it expanded. And every 7 years, he touches base with these same people. This was the first year in which one of them had died. Another one had also been diagnosed with throat cancer. And it was a very emotional entry. And this whole series is basically Boyhood, but playing out over literal real time. It's an extremely affecting documentary, and we all know I'm not the biggest documentary person, but this one was just I've spent a lot of time with these people watching the 7 Up series over the last few years, and so once you do and you get to these, you have to wait for the next movie to be a theatrical release. You feel very emotionally invested, and this one lived up to everything that I wanted it to be. So my number 10 is 63 Up.
Like I said, my number 10 had a bunch of 3.5 films to choose one from, and I pretty much went with the one that stood out the most for me. I think it was pretty popular amongst this crowd, at least those of you that saw it. I don't think it doesn't have the greatest overall ratings on like Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb and stuff, but I don't know. Didn't see this one coming, and I had a lot of fun with it. But my number 10, Crawl. Gators under the house, guys. Hurricanes. Scary. Tense. Fun stuff. So this, came along early in the season and had a lot of fun with it. So it's beat out some stuff like, I don't want to tip my hat too much. So, yeah, number 10 is Crawl for me.
First horror movie of the night.
Yeah.
How many are we going to get? Do you have a prediction? Not different ones, but just total. Well, then we'll have to get into definitions, and we'll be here till midnight.
Yep.
Yeah.
5 different titles. We'll say 5 different horror titles.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. Robert, number 10.
That's a perfect segue because my number 10 is Climax from Gaspar Noé. And I don't consider this to be a horror film, but if you do consider it, then it's one. Did we review this film on this podcast? Did we talk about Climax?
I don't believe so. No.
I haven't seen any of these movies you guys talked about yet.
Because I'm wondering why I saw this one twice. Because it's not a movie you really, most people would be itching to see a second time. It's pretty upsetting. It's pretty provocative. It's about young dancers who gather in a remote and empty school building to rehearse on a cold and wintry night. The all-night celebration soon turns into a hallucinatory nightmare when they learn that their sangria is laced with LSD. And so it gets pretty horrific in the last fifth of the film. It gets very nightmarish. But up until then, I think it's very artistic. I heard an interview with the choreographer of these dancers on this film. And she was saying that Gaspar Noé contacted her to choreograph the film, and I think she hadn't done a film before, and he convinced her by telling her that he wanted to make a movie about energy. That was his pitch, and she's like, "Okay, I'm in." And to me, that's kind of what's going on, and just the vibration of this film, the wavelength that it's on, is super interesting to me. It is provocative, it is upsetting, but I think there's 4 films that are very agitating in my top 10. I just kind of am drawn to that. It's so different than other stuff. It's the third film from Noé that I've seen. I liked his last one, Love, enough. I really, really am in on Irreversible, but I haven't even seen Enter the Void, which is supposed to be his best, I think, or one of the best. But Climax made my top 10 above a lot of films that got Oscar consideration and things like that. It just got a certain energy to it. It's really crazy to watch, and it's going to come up in one of our other lists a little bit later. But it's the only film I went back for a second time, and I can't remember why, but I still liked it the second time enough, obviously. Climax.
All right, Ian Nichols into number 9.
Number 9 is Bong Joon-ho's Parasite. Yeah, it won Best Picture. Yeah, it's really popular.
I've heard of it.
4.6 star rating on Letterboxd, highest rated movie on there. I don't know if I'd go that far, but it's definitely in my top 10 for a reason. The satire is spot on. There's a lot of themes going on here. Obviously, that kind of upstairs downstairs theme that just translates worldwide. I mean, that's why a large American population can jive with this. They get it. The first half has a lot of levity, and the second half is full of a lot of tension that also has underlying levity. It's a versatile film and a disturbing film and a hilarious film and an incredibly intelligent film. And so there's a good reason why my barber, of all people, asked me if I had seen Parasite without knowing that I do podcasts, movies, etc. This is everywhere, and it's kind of everywhere for a good reason. And separating myself from the pack, I still recognize this is absolutely one of the best movies of the year. So number 9 is Parasite.
Yeah, my number 9, I think, is one that none of you have seen. So I'm not sure. Aaron Schimberg's Chained for Life. It's kind of this pretentious hack director making a schlocky exploitation film with physically deformed actors who are mostly treated as lesser than, very second-class, third-class citizens on the set. Not everyone is of the deformed nature, but they're in there used as real characters or as props or as background. So I don't remember this movie at all, basically. Just a feeling I got from it. I liked it a hell of a lot. But it's one of the rare ones I like that is a movie about movies. It's a movie in a movie in a movie. There's a lot of cruelty, lessons learned, unlikely friendships formed, some very satisfying Freaks type revenge going on. It's meta, it's near plotless, it's basically one location, an old abandoned hospital or half abandoned hospital where they're shooting this schlocky horror film. It's a wonderful absurdist comedy, which is a theme for me this year for sure. And it's one of those movies where it's best when they're just sitting around talking. So I don't know how much of an idea that gives anyone of what it is, but this guy's a really good director, and it's a pretty out there film with actually some heart to it. So, Chained for Life, number 9.
Yeah, so number 9 for me is the film in this list that I remember the least, since you kind of mentioned that with your last one there, Ian. I definitely remember some stuff about it, and I definitely liked it. My number 9, Christian Petzold's Transit. We're traveling across Europe, trying to escape the quote-unquote fascists in this kind of fantasy reworking of World War II time or whatever. But yeah, I remember really enjoying like the cinematography and a few things about this film for sure. So yeah, number 9 for me, Transit.
I'm going with High Life from Claire Denis. This one was just
real feel-good film there.
Yeah, this is another disturbing movie. It's a sci-fi picture about like reproduction that focuses on reproduction. And so when you have a spaceship focused on reproduction of the human race, it's going to have a lot of sex going on. This has that, but it also has great performances from Pattinson, and Mia Goth is really good in it. Binoche is kind of wild in it. I always like seeing Andre Benjamin on screen, even if he was not given enough to do in this movie. I love that the spaceship is shaped like an apartment building floating through space. It's just so different. Like, what would Claire Denis do in the sci-fi genre? You wouldn't have pegged her to ever cross that bridge in her career. I'm late to Claire Denis' work, her oeuvre, if you will, for this French director. I've only seen her most recent stuff with Bastards and Let the Sunshine In, and so she's keep getting better and better. So I haven't even seen Beau Travail or 35 Shots of Rum, which I think a lot of her fans would consider to be her best. So, but this one is just provocative and artistic and stood out at the New York Film Festival for me, and stood out from the crowd all year. When you can put a fresh spin on a genre that I already like, it's going to be something I'm probably going to go for. So I took the bait, and I think a lot of people that give it careful consideration would like High Life as much as I did. And it's another one that I don't know if I'm anxious to watch again, but just seeing a little tiny baby walking down like the runway of a spaceship and growing up in outer space, and then all the crazy antics that are happening on this ship. It's very unusual, and I love that. So High Life is number 9.
Well, Ian, where are we at for horror movies? I mean, was that horror?
4.
Was Parasite horror?
No,
I haven't been heard. I haven't heard it been called horror.
Okay, was The Noe horror?
I've heard that been called horror.
Okay,
and
mine.
I think
so. That's 3 then, because Chained for Life's not horror. So Eric's. Okay, we're at 3, I think.
That sounds right.
Okay. Oh, we're getting there quick.
We're about to be at 4.
All right. Well, there you go. Ian, go ahead with number 8.
My number 8 is Robert Eggers' The Lighthouse, which is one of my favorite horror movies of the year, and definitely my favorite comedy of the year. I LOL'd in theater watching this movie. Fart jokes are great. They should be in every movie ever. Definitely helps release the tension.
Waka waka. I always forget how much you love fart movies or fart jokes, and you always stress how much you love fart jokes. I don't know why I can't remember that. But you're right. They're great.
They're fucking great. This movie is so over the top and mysterious and psychologically both disturbing and dizzying. And I mean, everything that happens in this film is confounding and delightful, but also delightfully disturbing. Using like old 19th century Northeast Maine language here. Like they actually did research doing that. These characters speak very, very funny, and they're isolated on an island, encountering harbinger of a mermaid, shit literally blowing into their faces, wrestling, dancing, punching, killing, and essentially just trying to survive their own heads and each other's. It's just a mad film, and an incredible follow-up to The Witch. This was certainly one of the most beautiful films I'd seen this last year, and also one of the biggest surprises. I was looking for horror movies, or for a horror movie from Robert Eggers. I got it, and I also somehow got a hilarious film. So number 8 is The Lighthouse.
So you said a big surprise, one of your big surprises. Why exactly is it a big surprise? I mean, it's Eggers, it's these guys. I mean, I'm pretty sure you're down with both these guys. Mm-hmm. So where's the surprise? I don't know. I don't get it.
I was definitely expecting something a little more reflective of The Witch, right? The Witch is much more. It has even though they somewhat feel the same in aesthetic, I think The Witch is more structured, right, narratively. Yeah. So
just a change in tone, basically.
Change in tone and the humor. Like, how did I end up laughing out loud in this film? I don't. Maybe Booksmart was the other movie where that happened for me in a theater, but otherwise, no. This is singular. It's weird. It's great.
It's great.
Number 8.
What's great? I won't say it. Never mind. Leave it. That's good.
Okay.
That sounded great. Say it again. Don't say it again. No, it was great. It was. That was good. I think it's great you were able to go into that without knowing it was funny.
Yeah. No, it was a treat. It was absolutely.
I definitely didn't know it was funny. And I saw it later. So, Ian the Minister, what's your number 8?
Yeah, this is where our crossover starts, I guess. So it is one of 2, I think. No, one of 3 I got a rewatch of. And it's Claire Denis' High Life. So Robert raved already. I would say existential, experiential, utilitarian sci-fi trip to hell, with just bits of humanity to keep you from slitting those wrists as watching, and hope through the eyes of youth, maybe some hope. For real, it was just the experience of this. It was one of those things where I saw it very late when I was very tired, and I find extreme fatigue to feel like being on drugs, certain drugs anyway, and certain movies play in a certain way, and that is the way I saw Under the Skin the first time, and that is how I saw this, and it leaves you just with images that stick with you, just weird blurring images as your eyes are full of water as you're trying to keep them open. So yeah, I was a huge fan of this, and for Claire Denis, I find it, I'm not sure, I need to dig more, but I've only seen a handful. I find it interesting so far that the 2 I love are the 2 horrible ones that don't seem to fit in with her general thing. But maybe she doesn't have a general thing. But High Life and Bastards are the 2 I love, and they're horrifying.
Number 8 for me, Ian Nichols just mentioned it in passing. The funniest movie of the year for me, Booksmart. Also a nice surprise. Yeah, I had a great time with this. Caitlin Dever and Beanie Feldstein are a delight in this film. It's very different, but it just, I feel, I had 8th Grade kind of in the same vein last year. That a little more on the dramatic side, but yeah, this hit that same sweet spot for me. So I definitely the funniest straightforward comedy for me this year. Booksmart, number 8. Olivia Wilde, too, taking a stab at directing here. So, see good things, guys. I see good things. Robert, number 8.
I'm going with Waves, which is the 3rd film from Trey Edward Schultz. I liked Krisha. That was good, his first one. personalized from his life. And then It Comes at Night was decent, but I think he finally made a great film with Waves, which is also a personal story. Some of the main characters, like tribulations he goes through, came from Schultz's life, but he partnered with the star of the film, at least half the film, Kelvin Harrison Jr., who was the son in It Comes at Night. They've had a friendship over the years, and they collaborated to flesh out this character and this storyline. What I really like about it is those two performances from Kelvin Harrison Jr. and Taylor Russell. The film is kind of bifurcated what it does formally when it switches gears. I thought the film is going to end at a certain moment. I thought that it seemed short. It seemed like it was a shorter film. It's about ready to end, and it's kind of crazy, but it's not the end. It keeps going. And where it changes, it was just really exciting to me formally. But beyond that, the director, Schultz, I think he's a younger guy, early 30s. But this film, it deals with things like Black excellence and trauma in a family, how it's called Waves, I think, because of ripple effect, how a traumatic event can affect people that are sort of tangentially related to that event. And what Schultz does as a younger director, it's kind of a teenage perspective. Both these lead characters that I like so much are teenagers. They're in high school. And the film is shot in a way that's kind of like a music video, very stylish. A lot of swirling camera shots, 360, driving down the road, because it's in that teenage dream mindset. And you're in high school, you dream about the future of your love life, or becoming an adult, or being on your own, or college, or the next steps, and being an adult. This film captures that while also having a great performance from Sterling K. Brown as a guiding hand that's perhaps got too strong of a grip on the wheel, trying to guide his kids' lives, and so he learns from that. It was a film that just kept revealing itself in different ways to me, and it's interesting for a lot of. I think I could talk about this film for a lot longer. So it's moved around in my top 10, but never fallen out of it. And I think Schultz is in that group of young directors to watch. He's already come out with some three pretty solid features, and can't wait to see what he does next. But Waves is enough to be at number 8 of the year for me.
All right, to number 7, Ian.
Yeah, my number 7 is Pedro Almodovar's Pain and Glory. I actually got to watch this film with Jericho from the Third Act podcast. First time he and I ever met, and we got to see this in theater together.
Great movie together. That's awesome.
Yeah. This is perhaps one of the best Almodovar films that I have seen in quite a few years. It is a semi-autobiographical film, and Antonio Banderas playing Pedro Almodovar, and even though it's not Pedro Almodovar is not the character, but it's very, very similar. A film director who washed up addict. You can tell there's a lot of regret, and he also has an ailing body. Is his ailing body psychosomatic from his past and his transgressions? And that's kind of the hypothesis here. And it's a really beautiful film, also much simpler and less meandering than Almodovar's previous films. And this kind of meditation on the body and the mind, and how both of those age, both separately and together in tandem, is really profound here. And not to mention, Banderas gives an amazing performance. I mean, perhaps the best I've ever seen him. And he's an absolute delight, as is everyone in this cast. It's just a great, solid entry from Almodovar. Probably something I haven't seen the likes of since, I don't know, maybe Volver. So I highly suggest people latch on to this. But this is something that I didn't think would end up in my top 10, but it's lingered with me. The more I've thought about it, the more I really, really, really love it. So my number 7 is Pain and Glory.
The best, Banderas. This guy clearly did not see The Laundromat. Right, Robert? Am I right? The best Banderas?
No, I'd go Pain and Glory on that one. Sorry.
Okay. That might have been the worst Banderas. Yeah, I have. Okay, I'll tell you the title, but I have a dumb guy question that I hope someone has the answer to. So my number seven, we spoke of Jericho just recently, or Symbiotic, or whatever you called him. We have to thank him for putting his list out a month and a half before we did our show, so I could see, like so many others, and be very moved by the Netflix film by Maya Tailfeathers and Kathleen Hepburn, the film The Body Remembers When the World Broke Open. My dumb guy question is, are Native people in Canada Native Americans because it's America, or is there somebody who calls people from there Native Canadians?
I think they just call them natives.
Just Native, okay. I mean, it is America. I don't know.
Right.
I don't want to. Yeah. Okay. Natives. Anyway, so it is a story. So it is a story of, well, it starts basically with a young native pregnant young woman barefoot in the rain, crying after being physically abused by her partner, and another native finding her, bringing her into her house, and from there trying to help somebody who's in a hell of a situation and for many good reasons resistant to things for emotional reasons. It's a single uncut, well, it's real time anyway. There's cuts, but you can't really see them. It's not showing. I don't think it's a showy film in any way, but the choice not to cut, I think, makes a hell of a difference on the emotional impact. This is one of the few that work really strongly emotionally, but it's not that I was crying or heartbroken necessarily with this thing. I was just moved really with the filmmaking by how honest I found it. So it's dealing really honestly with physical abuse and tying maybe poverty into that. The idea that there is no easy answer, there's no clean fix. This isn't a film about resolutions. It's about, to me, it's just really how this often works, and the idea that emotional ties are very, very hard to sever for people, even if on the outside looking in rationally things seem obviously, and also how not, when you don't have money, how unrealistic maybe those severing of relationships are. Like, how do you do this in any real way? There are resources, but is it realistic long term? What do you do? So it's psycho. Yeah, the way there's self-loathing, there's shame, there's just psychological abuse, how it's all tied in, and just the idea of, like, it might take 20 times, it might take 50 times, it might never happen, it might never get better, no matter how much people want to help. And I think every choice in the filmmaking helped drive this home. I was moved quite a bit by this one. I was impressed and moved, I would say.
All right, number 7 for me, another sort of surprise. The cast was strong going into it, but not really hot on this director that often. But number 7 for me, Marriage Story. Noah Baumbach delivering here. Fantastic ensemble cast. Scar Jo, probably the best as far as I'm concerned she's been since at least Under the Skin. Driver, great year, fantastic in this, and Laura Dern, one of the great performances of the year for sure. So yeah, gut-wrenching film, and a little kind of funny on the side. So Marriage Story hit for me, number 7.
I'm going with a Chinese film, Ash is Purest White, from Jia Zhangke, a film I saw like a year and a half ago at a festival, and has just held strong. It hasn't been surpassed in my top 10. Keeping with the theme of all my 4 films so far, the third one I've seen from Noé, from Denis, from Schultz, and now the third one I've seen from Jia Zhangke, and I think it's the best one I've seen ahead of Mountains May Depart and Touch of Sin. I just love how it uses time. I think that Zhao Tao, the female lead in it, is tremendous. She just missed my top 5 performances. So you won't hear her name again, but I just picture her when I think of this film. It's like, in 3 acts, what she is in the first act is so different than what her character becomes in the second and third act, especially. So it's set in China's underworld. It's a tale of love and betrayal, and it spans several years in a very changing landscape in China, both geographically and culturally. It captures that, as Zhao Zhongke is known to do. He's intercutting like home movies from like his mini DV camera of stuff he shot 15 years ago on like vacation or just in his travels and scouting, and he'll throw that into the film because it's relevant to the character's story. It's just very poetic and moving in its tone and its pacing, but the characters really are developed even without a ton of dialogue. Just a super impressive film, and makes me want to dive more into the catalog of Zhongke's work. But Ash is Purest White. It's definitely worth seeking out. It should be available on VOD for people, I would think, to really round out Chinese cinema in 2019. Definitely enough for number 7 on my list.
All right, Ian, number 6.
My number 6 is Greta Gerwig's Little Women. One of the most pleasant surprises this year. I do love a good period piece, and this is an incredible adaptation of a story that has been done over and over and over again. Of course, Greta Gerwig is an amazing talent, but we also have a cast that is just insanely credible. Saoirse Ronan, Florence Pugh, Emma Watson, Laura Dern, Meryl Streep, Timothy Chalamet, Louis Garrel, Bob Odenkirk, Tracy Letts, Chris Cooper. The list goes on. This movie I was expecting to maybe like, and probably not. I am not the biggest fan of Little Women, and I've seen different versions of it, even on stage, and have not been impressed. So this was a big surprise to me to be so rapturously in love with this. It's just a lovely film. It's so pleasant. It's like a warm embrace. And I don't usually go for those kinds of superlatives to describe a film, and usually reject films that are described that way. But there's something so joyful about this movie. I watched a roundtable with the cast just a couple weeks ago, just out of curiosity. And it was clear watching them all interact why this film was so joyful. They very clearly wanted to spend time with each other, enjoyed the time that they had with each other. They vacillated between humor and intellect, and it was it made so much sense. Everyone contributed to this film on such an invested level that the end result is one of the most pleasant viewing experiences that I had in theaters this year. And kudos to Greta Gerwig for throwing in a bit of a meta twist to make everything that much more palatable. So my number 6 is Little Women.
Yeah, I believe I'm the only one who saw this, and it makes a hell of a lot of sense because it's one of those deals where even the synopsis makes it pretty clear it's a movie they made for me or you, but they made it for me this time. It's Kirill Serebrenikov's Leto, which is a Russian film. I think Leto means summer. And this is 80% a hangout movie, 20% musical. Like a real musical where they break out in song, set in early 1980s Leningrad underground rock scene. It's smoking, it's playing music, it's talking about music. It's a young misunderstood generation navigating Russia in the 80s. It's every guy looks like Julian Casablancas or Donovan. It's rebellious. It's actually heart-filling. It's gorgeous. It's black and white. It's just groups of young people singing on the beach or playing at these awkward government-sponsored rock clubs where you have to run your lyrics by an old woman who says it's enriching to the youth in some way, or it's playful enough, or it's whatever it is. Where everyone watching has to sit in seats but you have punk rockers on stage breaking guitars. It's a weird scene. There's a lot of seemingly original music, and then the musical part. Outside of that music, there's the actual musical stuff where people on the streets break out into Russian versions of Iggy Pop songs and Talking Heads songs. And the movie's really just a lot of people sitting around smoking, talking about how great David Bowie and Lou Reed are. So that's kind of the life I wish I lived more often. So it's called Leto. It's rentable and stuff. I don't know who else would like it, but it is wonderful.
You had me at smoking.
A lot of fucking smoking. There's actually a scene where a woman tries to seduce a man, and it works. And the way she does it gets him to take a bite out of a raw tomato, and then ask him to bathe her baby. And he's like, and it works. That's how you seduce.
Money.
Yeah.
Number 6 for me, the Colombian film Birds of Passage. We talked about this on the show. The music, the visuals here, the dynamic between this mother-son-in-law running this marijuana operation, the friend that causes trouble, the uncle, all this stuff. I forget what they call the messenger characters, but all very fascinating, all very well done. Birds of Passage, my number 6. Love that film.
You know that sound, that foghorn from Lighthouse means we have a horror film. It's not Lighthouse. It's Us. Number 6 for me is Jordan Peele's Us. It's definitely a horror film. I thought about going with a tie here, guys. Just to go back for a minute. I thought about putting. You hear Parasite and Us compared to each other so often. They deal with a lot of the same themes. And I was thinking that again after seeing Parasite for the 3rd time. It's the only film I saw 3 times last year. I checked out the black and white screening of it recently. But it just couldn't crack the top 10 because I think I prefer Us, and I prefer the other films I've mentioned so far, as much as I love Parasite and have recommended that to more people than any other film by far this year. Parasite's number 11, full disclosure. Almost said full exposure.
Whoa, man. Let's cool it.
My list is exposed on Letterboxd, though, if you want to take a peek. Jordan Peele, I think, just delivered with Us, with the performances he gets from his actors. Lupita, Winston Duke is great in it. The kids are great in it. I've only seen this once. I can't wait to see it again because I had so much fun reading people's interpretations and theories about what's really going on beneath the surface, if you will, in Us. And so I want to watch it again through that lens and see how it plays for me. So I'm looking forward to doing that. I just didn't get a chance to watch it again, but I didn't need to watch it again for it to be number 6 on my list. It's funny, it's clever. It's got Tim Heidecker and Elizabeth Moss supporting roles, and they keep coming to mind. A lot of the visuals, a lot of the sound cues, how compact it is, how efficient it is. It's simple enough, but not over simple. It just has so much going for it. I love what Jordan Peele is doing. He's another one of those. There's so many good sophomore efforts from guys like Peele and Eggers and Ari Aster and Greta Gerwig. We've mentioned them already when we were so excited for them, all of them, a couple of years ago, and they all came through and delivered really good follow-ups. So a reason to be excited. Us is solid proof.
5 horror films. How are you feeling about that guess, Ian? More than 5 now, right?
I don't know. Yeah, that might be happening. That might be happening.
It's that fucking alligator one that threw everything off.
Yeah.
No one could have expected some schlocky alligator movie.
Eric, your curveball crawl.
Well, when you only see 65 films, the curve is a little more weighted. So, all right. Speaking of that, it's always tough to pull together 5 favorite performances for the year when you don't see that many films. So we'll start with the Minister's top 5 performances here. How tough was this process for you this year, Minister?
Yeah, well, as I said to you guys online, I need to start keeping lists, because if you don't remember a movie very well, it's really hard to remember specific performances. So I could think of a lot of people I liked. I just couldn't really remember why. I came up with 5. I feel like my number 5 could have been a shock and awe moment, but reminiscent of when I dropped my Gerard Depardieu number 1 that one year, and there was audible gasps. But I think I let this slip. Luckily, I post so much in our threads that no one reads most of it, so maybe this slipped through. But I am going, right? Number 5. Go right through all 5?
5 through 1.
All right. So my number 5, which I wish I could have shocked people with, is Mad TV's own Will Sasso.
Say what? In what?
Mad TV season 83. Really good skits this year. He was in a movie called American Woman, which is not great, but I'll go quick. He's basically my number 2 working class hero this year. He's a working class brother-in-law, just being a good dude to a bit of a rock to this spiraling Sienna Miller character who's a single mother whose daughter goes missing, and he's just like the guy who helps out, but he's not Superman and he's not perfect human. He has limitations. But I just thought of my 5, it's the most like real performance. Like I buy that guy, I like that guy, and I was surprised that Will Sasso did it. Number 4, Eric touched on her. It's Carmina Martinez in Birds of Passage. She's the cold, powerful matriarch with questionable morality in her ruthless quest to protect her family. It's like this quiet powerhouse performance, and awesome. 3 was in a movie I talked about, Jess Wexler in Chained for Life. It's like the film, it's levels and levels and levels. And because it's a bunch of different things, she's a real person who's this A-list movie star. She's a scream queen within the film. She evolves. She has surprising depth and humanity. And as an actress, always, she's got great comedic instincts. So she was awesome. Number 2, Al Pacino in The Irishman, because I think he just explodes and is a blast. And it's a movie that at 4 hours needed someone at a different energy level. And I just think he was essential to making that film work. I don't know how great the performance is. I loved the performance though. And he had the charisma that he needed to give us in Jimmy Hoffa the closest thing we had to a hero in that film. So I loved him. And my number 1, gotta go there. I could have picked 55 people in this film, but Philippe Jaurès in Coin and the Extra Humans. He plays, none of you saw this, none of you care. He plays the straight man to the captain, who is the most ridiculous performance I've ever seen in any film ever. So he has to play straight man to that. Anyone hear my dog howling?
Yeah, it sounds like a siren. They're coming to get you.
Yeah, he howls with every siren. He's going for it. But yeah, this guy has to play straight man to the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen. So it's mostly, he does some good physical comedy, but it's mostly like these guffawing, eyes wide open, mouth agape reaction shots to just otherworldly mugging and absurdism around him. He's like one of the few characters in the whole film that has a clue, but really he's number 1 because he's worthy of a laugh every time, and this movie's almost 4 hours long, so that's a lot of times. And he is great because for no reason, he just, every time they drive the police car, he does a trick where he jerks the wheel to the left and drives on 2 wheels sideways, like at about almost 90 degrees. I don't know. He's almost parallel with the ground, and twice he crashes it. And then they just walk out. But he's got great tricks and a hilarious face. Coin, Bruno Dumont.
It gets pronounced Quan.
No.
Okay. I thought those sirens were coming to take you away for picking a TV show. Well, I guess you didn't pick the TV show. You just picked an actor from it. But.
Yeah, and I didn't put Twin Peaks on any list.
You didn't.
I'm not ridiculous.
No, neither did I. Did I.
Okay. Sorry. That is a shot at no one here, I guess. Okay.
Yeah. Christian, he's looking at you. All right. My top 5 acting performances here. Seems like I've done this specific move the last 2 or 3 years since we've gone to this all-inclusive top 5. But my number 5 typically aren't, maybe not the greatest performance, but it's something from, I'm giving a shout out mostly to somebody that I just thought unexpectedly had a pretty good turn. And that puts my number 5 with Ray Romano, guys. Not from The Irishman, but from a Netflix film from right back in January, I believe, called Paddleton. Surprisingly emotional movie. Mark Duplass and he are kind of these misfit neighbor friends that befall some tragedy. Doing some serious drama here, pulls it off as this kind of uncomfortable guy. So I'd recommend it to anybody. Check it out if you haven't seen it. It's on Netflix. Paddleton. Ray Romano, my number 5. Number 4, Ian, just same as you, Al Pacino as Jimmy Hoffa in The Irishman. Magnetic, fantastic. I loved it. Number 3, much talk about this ensemble. Yeah, definitely agree on the ensemble, but standing out for me this year, definitely. From Parasite, I'm going with Yeo Jong-jo, who plays the matriarch of the rich family here. I'd love, seemingly everything's over her head. The way she kind of bounces between these weird situations. The way she handles everything in this film, I think she's probably the key factor in this film. But yep, she's my number 3. Number 2, Joaquin Phoenix in a film I pretty aggressively pisses me off, but he is fantastic in it. No denying him in Joker. And number 1, always love her work and for many reasons, but Laura Dern in Marriage Story, really, really great this year. So I'm going to pretty much hand her the Oscar anytime she's working in doing a significant role in anything. Love her shtick, but yeah, huge performance. Ian, I didn't have the, well, I guess I did. Yeah, I was about to say I always lean on a kind of unknown to us foreign actress, and shit, I just did it
number
again.
1,
So,
but not at number
not
1.
number 1. Yeah.
That was interesting because you could have went about 8 ways with Parasite. So because the daughter was my number 6, just missed.
Okay.
So it's like you could go. But I am real curious with Ian and Robert because you picked for your number 5 a CBS sitcom guy.
Mm-hmm.
I picked a Fox shitty skit comedy guy. So I would hope they have an NBC and an ABC, or maybe a I don't know, UPN.
CW.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Robert, anybody from the CW in your list?
Marlon Wayans.
He does have a couple good movies, but they're not 2019.
Oh, come on, Robert.
I'm a fan of Marlon Wayans. Used to be, up to a certain point. I had to draw the line about 15 years ago. My number 5 is Al Pacino. You guys mentioned the reason why. I mean, the first time I watched Irishman, I thought Pesci was the standout performance. He just did a great job. But the second time, it was clear that I love what Pacino is doing in that movie. He's what sticks with you. I will remember that performance, and it's my image of Jimmy Hoffa because I don't know Jimmy Hoffa outside of that Irishman. Pacino's great. Number 4, give me Willem Dafoe. Can't believe you guys haven't mentioned him from The Lighthouse. The monologues he's delivering in that. I mean, God, he's just breaking it down, and the beard. It's just a role he seems physically born to play. He delivers. Dafoe is wonderful in The Lighthouse. Number 3, I don't know if I ever thought that I have Shia LaBeouf in my top 5 performances of the year. It took him playing his own father in Honeyland, kind of a flashback. And I'm noticing that all these people on this list are tortured souls, these characters, except for Pacino's Hoffa. He's kind of got the head on straight. It seems like in Irishman somewhat, even though he's crooked as well. But Dafoe has tortured his character in Lighthouse. Shia LaBeouf's portrayal of his father. He's got a lot of issues going on, and it led to basically a PTSD diagnosis for his son Shia, and so part of the therapy years later was to write this film, and then for Alma Harrell to help him make it, or him to help her make it, and vice versa. Other great performances that are drawn out, but I think Shia was the magnetic one, and he's just blossomed into a great actor. I think since around several years ago when we talked about Lawless, Shia is just interesting. I want to see what he's up to. And he stepped back. He thought about quitting acting, and I'm glad he didn't because of Honey Boy. So we'll see what's ahead.
Well, it's good you put a Disney sitcom star on there, so you are doing well.
I don't know if Elizabeth Moss has any ties to cable networks, but she is my number 2 performance of the year for what she does in the film called Her Smell. Terrible title for a film, but wonderful performance as an aging rock star, going through the depths, the lowest points of music fame and celebrity. I'll have more to say about that film a little bit later, but her performance is one of the best in a career of great performances. She's always good. Number 1, I'm going to Joaquin Phoenix. I thought what he did with the Joker was, adjacent to Heath Ledger in the same role. He found a way to not quite reinvent it, but stand apart from that role, but a similar mental state he had to be in to portray that character. What he does physically, his line delivery, his mannerisms. I love the look of the film. I love a lot of things about the Joker film, even though it's not in my top 10. But I think Joaquin is the thing that makes it such a kind of a breakthrough in comic book movies for me. You don't see performances like this often, in comic book films or otherwise. A great actor at his peak. I think he's so great as the Joker. I don't really want to see a sequel. I don't want to see him as Joker again. I think leave it be. But super interesting what he did. Who cares what's ahead?
Whew. Robert, you and I, we're 2 peas in a pod. Number 5 is Al Pacino from The Irishman. I'm not really going to go on. You guys have said everything.
Clean sweep. All right, Al. Good work.
True. Yeah, he would have won the Oscar if the 4 of us were the Academy. Number 4 is Saoirse Ronan, who so gracefully balances youth and adulthood in Little Women, and just expresses so much poise in that role. Number 3 is Florence Pugh in Midsommar, who does an incredible job of showing us the movements through grieving and also dealing with a terribly neglectful boyfriend. I also loved her in Little Women as well, though. That was kind of a toss-up. Number 2, Elizabeth Moss, Her Smell. It's just a dizzying performance of an extremely fractured and broken woman. And I didn't love the film at first, and then it grew on me later. But the only constant throughout that transition was that Elizabeth Moss gave an incredible performance. And it was really a coin toss with my number 1 and Elizabeth Moss. However, Lupita Nyong'o from Us wins out. I wish more people, when talking about acting and performing, thought about the physical aspect of things more. Lupita Nyong'o gives an incredibly physical performance in this, and it is the core of her character as someone who hides a dark secret, as someone who at one point was a ballet dancer, and as a mother and a Black woman in America. Her entire composure of every single inch of her body speaks to her character and to the dialogue of her character. Hands down, one of the most underrated performances of the entire year. And I'm so happy that we have her and that she exists. So yeah, my number 1 was Lupita Nyong'o from Us.
And 3 of your top 5 were in my. I had Lupita and Saoirse and Pugh from Midsommar in my top 10. So we really do see acting very, very similarly. It sounds like.
Damn, son.
Between all of our number 1 picks, we have all 4 of the Oscar acting categories covered, by the way. So these are the winners. It is Joaquin's Best Actor, Dern is Best Supporting Actress, Lupita is Best Actress, and a French guy with an overbite guffawing is Best Supporting Actor.
Not to mention the 2002 People's Choice Awards, Will Sasso.
There it is.
He's pretty good.
All right, let's do one more category here, guys. Your top 5 new to me films in 2019. So films from other years that you first saw in 2019. I had a weird year with that. Very few, at least that I recorded, and I kind of sat and thought about it, and I couldn't really think of much more that I'd seen for the first time. So I could only find 7 or 8 films here, but all good choices. So let's go with number 5, The Seduction of Mimi from 1972. Muller's film. We talked about that on the show. Love that one. The Servant from 1963 makes number 4 for me. Robert Flicksman's Gift, Ace in the Hole, Billy Wilder, number 3. Yeah, that's probably one it's gonna stick with me for a long time. Number 2, the great heist film Rafifi from Jules Dassin, 1955. And a film, I don't know why it took me so long. Somebody finally browbeat me about not having seen this yet. So I checked it out real early in the year. And it's maybe the best concert film there is out there. So Jonathan Deme's 1984 film Stop Making Sense. That's Talking Heads. Concert documentary film. Oh, fantastic. If you haven't seen it, even if you don't think you like the Talking Heads, check it out. It is a great concert film. So that's the number 1 new to me film. Robert, what were your top 5 new to me's?
Yeah, it was another banner year. Yeah, even my 6 through 10 could be top 5 most years. My real number 5 is Jules and Jim, but we just talked about that on a recent Flicksation episode. We had a great convo about that film, so I'll substitute that one for John Carpenter's Escape from New York, if you can believe I had never seen that. And I just thought it was excellent. Just the tone and the sound effects, or the score that Carpenter's known for, and the visual effects, and what Kurt Russell's up to being a movie star. My number 4 is Godfather Part 2, but I actually have seen pieces of that before and seen it on Netflix or something years ago and paused it and stopped it, and I totally forgotten it. So watching it in theater was like a revelation, but that's not that new to me. So I'll say 28 Days Later is number 4 from Danny Boyle. I'm a fan of Boyle most of the time, but I think this is his best work. Great zombie movie before they were super popular, way before Walking Dead or anything of that ilk. Really excellent horror film. Number 3 best old film I saw last year is Hyenas, African film from 1992 from Jabril Diop Mambeti, who did Tuki Buki, and his niece did Atlantics this year, Mati Diop. But Hyenas I liked way better than Tuki Buki or Atlantics for that matter. Probably my favorite film from the continent of Africa that I've seen. I love it that much. It's just excellent. The story it tells of the small town and the trials and tribulations, and it kind of gets some little bit of magical reality to it towards the end. Great film. Check out Hyenas if you get a chance. Number 2 overall is a film that's been hard to see in theaters, but I was lucky that the museum showed I Am Cuba from 1964. Mikhail Kalatozov, Russian-born director, communist ties to the making of this film, but the editing is so modern and the camera work is so modern. It doesn't look like 1964, but it's a restoration of a film that's had the quality deteriorate over the years just from being old and lost, and it is commentary on Cuba. So, but it's veiled enough to where it's not obvious that it had to be banned, at least not banned for forever. So it can be seen. I think it can be rented now. So it's Soy Cuba or I Am Cuba, just really innovative, really beautiful, a handful of stories, sort of like vignettes, but they're all political and cultural and make you think. Really sharp stuff. It's in my top 100 films ever. And the same could be said for my number 1 old films new to me last year was Do the Right Thing. It took me like 30 years to see this film. I should have seen it way sooner. I love what Spike Lee does with this Brooklyn neighborhood story. I can see its influence on a lot of films I've seen that I saw before I watched Do the Right Thing. My ranking of Spike Lee films is like shameful. A lot of stuff that a lot of people don't like is high up for me, but I haven't seen enough of his catalog to make that list public because I hadn't seen Do the Right Thing until just last year. So I'm still working on my Spike Lee retrospective and educating myself on his work. But Do the Right Thing was a revelation, and it's a shock to the system that most people already knew was as great as it is.
I always love doing this one because, frankly, we all know this. Old films rule, new films drool. And so I got to see an amazing bunch of films this year. So my number 5 is Nicholas Ray's Johnny Guitar, with a towering performance from Joan Crawford, a great kind of noirish Western. Number 4, first time ever seeing Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. It ages well. It's still beautiful and still dazzling. I've got 2 documentaries in my top 5, which is extremely out of character. However, I stumbled upon this one at number 3's Portrait of Jason, directed by Shirley Clark. Flamboyant queer man in, I believe, San Francisco, is basically just interviewed by Shirley Clark, a friend of his, and her cameraman. I can't remember. I believe he's also a friend. But essentially, the documentary starts out with just Jason telling his stories, and he's very effusive and charismatic. But as the night goes on, he's been smoking pot and he's been drinking the entire night, and eventually ends up being a complete sad sap. And the director can't help herself and steps in and criticizes him, and everything just kind of goes to shit. It's a really, really fascinating documentary, and a really great portrait of a queer character and queer life, a black queer life in the 60s. Number 2 is Rafifi, Jules Dessan. We talked about that earlier this year. And then number 1, I got to see this, all 10 hours of it, on 35 millimeter in one day. It was exhausting, but it was also exhaustive, and a true experience. That's all it was, is Claude Lanzmann's Shoah, the Holocaust, infamous and famous Holocaust documentary from the 1980s. It is, trust me, it is all of the things. It is all of the emotions that you could possibly have over 10 hours in uncomfortable theater, basement of the museum art, or basement of the art museum chairs. Super blessed to have seen it, though. It is on 35 millimeter, unforgettable.
Yeah, terrible year. Old films do rule. I didn't watch any of them. It took me until like 2 weeks ago before I really got my footing with the library system out here. So I lost my baby library system out there in Wisconsin, where I would have 7 films at all times. So I went from 120 to 20 on old films viewed. So I only have 3, and 2 of them we talked about on the show. So number 3 was 2009, Ilya Suleiman's The Time That Remains, which we did talk about. It was that comedic, semi-autobiographical film dealing with the creation of the Israeli state that I loved. Number 2, we didn't talk about, 1972, Larry Cohen's Bone. It's plenty provocative and hilarious, somewhat exploitation farce dealing with race and class, specifically wealthy white fear of black men. And I thought it was quite something, but really you go into it for the Yaphet Kotto show, and he is the center of this thing, and he is crazy, as you'd hope. And then number 1, I think maybe everyone mentioned, unless somebody had seen it twice, and that was 1955 Jules Dessan's Rafifi, so I don't have to hit on that again. But I'm dying to watch I Am Cuba, so I did not know that was available, Robert, and that's exciting.
Okay, everybody, part 1 of the best of 2019 in film is coming to an end here. Tune in the next few days to part 2. That will catch you up with the Ronnies and the Shitties, the worst films of 2019. the top 5 films of 2019, and a bunch of other favorite things from us from 2019 in film. Let's end out the episode now with the 2019 Film Al Awards from our good friend Al, the Listman Robinson. We'll talk to you in a couple of days, folks. It's time for Listmania with Al Robinson. Listmania. It's time for Listmania with Al Robinson. It's time for Listmania with Al Robinson.
Hello, everybody. This is Al, the Listman Robinson, coming at you with my yearly end-of-the-year awards. I like to call it the Al Awards because it's funny that way. And so this year is no exception. I have a 10 that I nominate for favorite movie. And then I'm going to also be giving you my awards for favorite director, favorite actor, favorite actress, and favorite screenplay, which I just like to combine the two since I don't like to, separate the two based on original and adapted. In fact, if I was ever to separate them, it would be comedy and drama. So anyway, why don't I get started? For my favorite screenplay, I have 2 honorable mentions. Both could be considered horror movies. One is called Ready or Not, which if you haven't seen, you definitely need to check out. And then The Dead Don't Die, which I know some people liked and some people didn't. I know Jericho was definitely not a fan. Sorry, Jericho. But my 5 that I like the most for my favorite screenplay are Booksmart, Dolomite Is My Name, Jojo Rabbit, Marriage Story, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And my winner is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I just love that dialogue. I love seeing Leo DiCaprio in his trailer, getting mad at himself for missing his lines and in the whole thing. And of course, Brad Pitt, you were riding a horsey. Just great fucking writing. Love it, love it, love it. So, now, moving on to Best Actress. I have 2 honorable mentions for that. I have Margot Robbie for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and the great Tilda Swinton in The Dead Don't Die. And if you have no idea what the fuck she was up to in that movie, neither do I. I just know it was something amazing. But then again, it's Tilda Swinton. She's always amazing. So my 5 for favorite actress are Scarlett Johansson for Marriage Story, Florence Pugh for Midsommar, or Midsommar, depending on who you are, Octavia Spencer for Ma, yes, I said it, Ma, not Loose, Samara Weaving for Ready or Not, because she is amazing in that, like I've already said about Ready or Not, and Constance Wu for Hustlers. I know everybody's all about Jennifer Lopez. I'm all about Constance Wu. My favorite actress of the year is Scarlett Johansson for Marriage Story. She is absolutely dynamite and gave a very, very, very good performance. And I don't know why she didn't win the Oscar, frankly. Anyway, moving on. My favorite actor again, I have 2 honorable mentions. I have Kelvin Harrison Jr. in Waves. He is ridiculously amazing in this movie. Very hard to watch at times, but really just pulls out a tremendous performance that I think everybody needs to check out if you have not seen Waves. And then my other honorable mention is Taika Waititi for Jojo Rabbit, playing Adolf Hitler in a tongue-in-cheek performance. And if you don't think it's tongue-in-cheek, I'm sorry. That's how I read it. It's very tongue-in-cheek. My 5 favorites are, for favorite actor, Willem Dafoe for The Lighthouse. Hark! Leonardo DiCaprio, Once a Time in Hollywood. Adam Driver for Marriage Story. Eddie Murphy coming back for Dolomite Is My Name. And yes, Brad Pitt for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, since I don't distinguish. And my favorite is Adam Driver for Marriage Story, just like Scarlett Johansson. The two are interchangeable. You can't have one without the other. They work together. That's just how it is. I don't make the rules. Moving on to favorite director. I have 2 honorable mentions. I have Shinichiro Ueda for One Cut of the Dead. And I have Olivia Wilde for Booksmart. And I just want to highlight Shinichiro Ueda for a second. He also plays one of the starring roles in that movie. And it's so hard to describe One Cut of the Dead. I will just say it's free on Amazon Prime. So if you haven't seen it, please go check it out. So my 5 then for favorite director are Ari Aster for Midsummer, Noah Baumbach for Marriage Story, Jim Jarmusch for The Dead Don't Die, Quentin Tarantino, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Taika Waititi, there he shows up again, for Jojo Rabbit. And my favorite, of course, is Quentin Tarantino. That should come as no surprise if you know me. Quentin Tarantino just made a masterpiece. I don't care what the hell anybody else thinks, especially the Oscars. I love Parasite, but I'm going to stand for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And then finally, favorite movie, and here I have 10 nominees, and they are in alphabetical order. Avengers Endgame, yeah. Avengers Endgame, of course. Dolomite Is My Name. Ford v Ferrari. Jojo Rabbit. Joker, yes, I said it, Joker. Knives Out. Marriage Story. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. One Cut of the Dead. And finally, yes, Parasite. Of course, Parasite. Because Parasite is also a masterpiece. Duh. But my winner is, of course, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Because Quentin Tarantino is a master filmmaker, master writer, and master storyteller. And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood has 2 of my favorite performances of the year. Probably my favorite cast overall. Production design, film editing, and so much more. And it's probably my only true A+ of the whole year. And so, if you're still listening, thank you for still listening. There you have it. You have just experienced the 2019 Movie Awards.